Okay, fantastic. Thanks God there is a backup plan always, right? So good morning to everyone. It's an honor to be here today after such a great speaker. So thank you very much for inviting me. Well, my name is Nayara Igaravide. I'm a third-year PhD student at the University of Deusto. And today I'm here to present a paper I've been working on. I'm sorry that the image is a little bit moved, but still understandable. So in this paper, I explore the concept of business diplomacy from the perspective of international political economy, which is a specific discipline. So let's move to the next PPT, please. Thank you very much. So this is how the presentation will be organized. Since I don't have much time, I will be giving very general notions. If you have any difficulty to understand any idea, I will be very happy to answer in the end of the presentation. So this is how the presentation will be organized. First of all, I will try to introduce the field of international political economy with different schools. And I will mention how multinational corporations are explored or studied from these different perspectives of the schools. Then I will mention IPE or international political economy in a post-global setting, and I will mention why it is important to adopt new perspectives since the context is changing quite a lot. And in the third place, I will mention what is the new contribution of business diplomacy to the field of international political economy. So let's go with the next one, please. Great. So international political economy is a discipline or subdiscipline of international relations, depending on who you ask, which studies the complex relationship between economics and politics in an international level. So it's a very broad topic. It can be studied from many different perspectives. That's why the school is very divided in different schools, both in ontological and epistemological terms. And there are three main schools, I think, that they are the most relevant to mention. And we are going to explore how they perceive multinational corporations. So yeah, next one. Fantastic. So the first one, and maybe the most important one, is the American school, taking into account that it's the dominant school or the mainstream school. It was created during the 1970s, during the Cold War. So its main priorities have to do with peace and interdependence. The authors believe that neoliberalism and also capitalism have a positive impact over in the international arena as well as for development. So they also believe that the hegemonic powers such as the United States have a very important role in keeping this international order. So when it comes to analyze multinational corporations, it is true that they are not really interested in studying these specific actors because they have a more state-centered perspective, but they do admit that they are very important actors promoting neoliberal policy around the globe, even if it has positive and negative consequences. And next, we have the British School and Latin American School, which oppose a little bit to the idea regarding hyperliberalization, neoliberalism, and so on, because they just state that neoliberalism also has negative consequences, and we have to adopt a critical perspective towards them. So first, the British School, which is also quite important and well-known, states that as important as studying nation states, it's important exploring other non-state agents such as multinational corporations, because they actually have the power to negotiate towards policies, specifically in areas such as financial and productive policies. However, when they explore multinational corporations, it's true that they usually tend to focus more on the conflict. They study the cui bono, so the winners and the losers of these international structures. So they don't really explore the idea of nations and corporations going towards same directions or finding same interests and so on. They rather focus on the conflict. And then we have the Latin American School, which is a more peripheral school, meaning that it hasn't had all the visibility that the others have had. It basically explores the reasons and the linkages behind the underdevelopment of developing countries, and they try to find a solution in external politics. However, when it explores multinational corporations, they usually have a quite hostile perspective towards them because they understand them as entities which promote this underdevelopment and these linkages to dominant states to which most of the multinationals belong, right? So if we pass the PPT, what I want to say, I want to show you, Inigo, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you very much. So what I want to say that if we see different perspectives in international political economy, we can see that the setting is not, it's quite a little bit hostile for the multinational corporations, because they are cited as secondary actors which promote neoliberalism, or as actors which promote underdevelopment and dependency. And this is perfectly understandable, taking into account the context where these schools were created. They were created during the 70s and the 80s, where these multinationals were involved in extractivist activities, exploitation activities, and so on. So being critical was normal, it was necessary, and still it is necessary. However, we have to talk, or we have to mention, that the performance of the multinationals has changed. Nowadays, they do take part in social agendas such as the 2030 agenda, and as well as other initiatives. So international political economy requires a new perspective, which includes these new activities they are carrying out, such as strategies as business diplomacy. So if we move on to the next slide, I think this is especially important due to the context we are in. The international context is changing quite a lot, even more with the current pandemic. So not only international political economy as field requires new challenges, but also corporations and nation states. So post-globalization is a process which started in 2008 after the crisis. And among the main characteristics, we can mention two specifically. On the one hand, the erosion of the hegemonic power, or of the power of United States, for example, as a hegemonic power, or international organizations, global organizations. And on the other hand, the increasing of nationalism, as we have seen in the last 8 years, there's an increasing of right-wing movements all over the world. So this post-globalization will bring a lot of changes for corporations as well, because they will have to face bigger instability in terms of political and economical terms. Many of the advantages they used to have during the globalization, such as the profit shifting, for example, in different administrations, or the offshoring, which means externalizing services in different parts of the world, and so on, will be dropping, because they are already known as practices which promote their development. So they will have to find new ways to make business and to make it work. At the same time, also nation states will have to face new challenges, such as new social conditions to be negotiated with an increasing technology over the world, a new job system, and so on. So if we change the slide, we can see that, let's go to thank you. We can see that the situation has become more evident, or has been accelerated due to the COVID-19 pandemic we are in. Some of the symptoms we can find, for example, are the lack of youth leadership, and we can see they haven't played any relevant role in an international level, or not even national level. Also, declining of international organizations such as the World Health Organization, which has been a little bit confusing. At the same time, we can also mention the role of the European Union, which has lacked, or it hasn't been very successful adopting a regional position regarding the measures to be taken, and so on. So most of the important measures have been taken in national or even subnational levels. So we have this return to national politics versus the international politics we used to have during the globalization story. So if we pass the PowerPoint, I think it's here where we mention the concept of business diplomacy. It allows us to have a different approach towards the relationship between nation states and corporations, since it is based on the idea that for the survival of these companies, it requires to establish long-term positive relationship with hosting countries, such as governments or non-governmental entities. So we can see that the interests, or the purposes of nation states and corporations are somehow linked, right? Through a business strategy. So they are trying, like, kind of working together on this. I don't think that business diplomacy is about solidarity increasing in corporations. I think it's more based on the idea that the impact of corporations has gained so much visibility, and it's something which has become like so obvious, and people are more conscious about it, that they need to take that into account in order to make business and ensure their survival in the international context. So if we pass to the next PowerPoint, so I think it was quite short. So talking about the contribution of business diplomacy as a concept to the field of international politics, international political economy, sorry, two are the main ones. I would like to say that new perspective, we have a new perspective regarding the impact of the multinationals in nation states. Until here, the current perspective have shown us that they are quite critical. The multinationals are entities which promote neoliberalism, dependency, and so on. And it might be true, of course, but we have to see and we need to update this perspective, taking into account the new strategies that are carrying out, such as business diplomacy, which might be a positive one or gives room to think that it could be positive, right? And the second place, also mentioning that we are in a changing context, so new challenges are emerging also for the field, but as well as for corporation and nation states. So it is important to rethink this relationship of nation states and corporation in order to go towards a more sustainable development that is everything about in this moment. So if we change the slide here to say, well, some of the research lines, I didn't remember that part, that come to my mind are these ones. For example, how does business diplomacy influence international performance in international system, or what spaces do multinationals have to share business diplomacy strategies? Are there international spaces to share these kind of strategies, or to what extent are business diplomacy strategies successful managing nation states and corporations' interests? Are some of the ideas that come to my mind that could be interest for the future. And if we change the PowerPoint, I didn't want to be very long, so that was it. I hope you some ideas come to your mind. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, feedback, I will be really happy to answer. Thank you very much. And thank you, Inigo, for passing the PowerPoint.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Nayara. Now I think we have some time for briefly some minutes to receive any feedbacks, questions, right? Things that people in the audience and participants might be interested on. So feel free, just check in the chat to make sure that no, okay. Who wants to break the ice?
That was a lot of information for a very short time, so probably people are so overwhelmed.
Okay, if not, we can do is maybe we can go for the 3 presentations, and then we have like an extended time to cover Q&A that might be related to the 3 of the presentations. Okay, so Nayara, thanks a lot again. Yeah. I'm gonna pass to the next participant intervening, which is going to be Ander Caballero. Ander, you're there, right? Can't see you, but I know you're on the list, so hopefully.
Good morning, Egunon.
Okay, Egunon. So Ander is an international consultant based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the US. He holds a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and a law degree from this university, from Deusto University. So welcome back to your alma mater. And he has served as chief operations officer of an international biotech firm in several locations around the world, and also has been representative for several years of the Basque government in the United States. So, Ander, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to pass the floor, and if you agree, we're going to make the same procedure, 10 minutes, and we're going to save the time for Q&A for at the end of the 3rd intervention, okay? So thanks a lot. Yours is the floor.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works.
It does.
Splendid. Okay, should probably start from the beginning to be helpful. Well, good morning, Gunnar. Thank you very much for the opportunity, especially to Dr. Ruel and Dr. Ariol for presenting in this second Business Diplomacy Conference. As you see here, I'm choosing the title Business Diplomacy, Advancing Security and International Relations through PNL Sustainability, maybe quite a provoking in a sense title, but I think it speaks to the core elements of interest for many of us in this group today. And I'll try to bring a perspective mainly around 4 questions. Does business diplomacy help attain business sustainability? Is sustainability good for the bottom line of the companies? Can business contribute to international relations and security in that sense? And does security in reverse contribute to better business performance? I wouldn't possibly try to lecture anybody in this room about business diplomacy, obviously, but I believe we can all agree, most probably around certain topics that I'm bringing, or certain points that I'm lining up here. Business diplomacy equips corporations with the skills, mainly diplomatic skills, or skills that were reserved for diplomats in the beginning, to engage with various stakeholders. And therefore, it allows for aligning the interests of different stakeholders at the same time. That I think we have a pretty clear image of corporations moving from the shareholders kind of responsibility perspective to more of a stakeholder, a little more inclusive one, and including more actors in the picture. And that speaks to integrating also sustainability in the business plan, right? I would argue that business diplomacy also allows for integrating sustainability across the board in the companies. Corporations need to welcome sustainability at the C-level, obviously, to empower the rest of the teams to move forward with such policies. But it's got to do with more of an across-the-board perspective, in the sense that we can't only rely on the CSR department or the sustainability department in order for sustainability itself to be part of our business plans in companies. The right execution of such skills and aligned interest would derive in companies gaining the trust and the license to operate in the markets they're present at, and therefore improving their reputation and their image, that basically allowing them to create competitive advantages in their markets. And as I say here as well, securing financial support. And I bring 2 examples that are quite recent. Multinationals facing certain problems with their investors, in the case of BlackRock and Engine No. 1 by California Teachers Association pension fund, where just for the fact of not being able to integrate sustainability in their strategies, they have been punished by the financial supporters in this case. So I would argue, therefore, that obviously business diplomacy and sustainability have a positive impact in the bottom line of companies as well. Moving on to international relations and security. It's been traditionally hard power, military power, economic power, in the sense of sanctions and coercive power, the way to deal mainly with international conflict and security. But a number of years ago, a Harvard professor brought the concept of smart power, in a sense including soft power together with hard power in the mix, and arguing that it was influence and persuasion, the tool that would allow for further advancement of the international agendas of states and governments. In that sense, economic security is gaining relevance in the security and international relations conversation. Again, not only from a punitive perspective relating to hard power, but also in a more proactive way of creating welfare, creating opportunity, and how important that is for the security perspective in order to build forward. In this case, obviously, non-state actors are gaining relevance in the equation, and companies are starting to be more relevant players, as I'm trying to argue here, in international relations as well. commercial diplomacy is one of the examples, being a government-driven effort that combines elements, channels, and tools in diplomatic terms from both governments and private sector actors in order to push internationally home-based business. But in this road, we're facing global challenges, as Ambassador was pointing out before, that are not just solvable by states, let alone corporations or other sorts of actors on their own. Those global challenges are not going to be able to meet exclusively, at least, with hard power tools. And I believe that smart power, in that sense, and the power to influence and gain a position there, is going to be more relevant. Therefore, the increasing importance of the image and reputation of a country when we're trying to face challenges such as the climate change and others. So what I see here is a space and a matter for reciprocity and collaboration. In which sense? Companies are obviously, and we've seen that throughout the globalization process, increasingly present in international scenarios. They're more global, they're more international. They're dealing and doing the businesses in more countries than they used to be before. And there is an increasing role, as again, Ambassador was pointing out before, of non-state actors in international relations. As Inigo very well pointed out, I can speak from experience in this point, both as a former operations director for a biotech firm, and also from a non-state government perspective, dealing with international relations and with international action in the United States on behalf of such governments, such as the Basque government. I think we all agree that business are starting to understand that the Sustainable Development Goals, in this sense, are means towards their own sustainability in the long run. And in that equation, and since national image and reputation sometimes is conveyed by firms and brands, in the sense that they're caring for values that are identified with their countries of origin, and also put together with the fact that people are starting to trust, at least in certain arenas, certain scenarios, they're starting to trust companies more than governments. I would argue that there is a space where business and government can align their motivations, can align their interests, and can push forward their agendas just through that matter of reciprocity and collaboration. As I mentioned before, that's also because, I mean, obviously in the field of smart power and soft power, national image and reputation is going to allow for those governments specifically to push their interests abroad and to gain the influence and to gain the affinities they need internationally. So in some, I would argue that business can advance security and sustainability issues. And I want to speak to two particular examples there. One of them being a bus company, the third largest utility in the world, Iberdrola, who recently gained the top position at the Open SDG Index, meaning that it's the top company pushing forward the SDG agenda from the corporate side. And also in matters of security, I would argue, we've recently seen in the US in the election, or during the election, many corporations giving a day off to their employees so they could go out and vote and exercise their right to vote, which I see as an effort to try to push the democratic process, especially in pretty challenging times, both in the US and elsewhere. And for obvious reasons, from a corporate perspective, I would argue that security paves the road for business to thrive internationally. Businesses need to feel secure, they need to play in a secure field, and security is what's going to allow them to thrive internationally. I want to talk about a very specific example, which I think crystallizes very well business diplomacy itself, both in the field of international relations and security, and from the perspective, obviously, of gaining sustainability in the long run for their own P&L and commercial activity. And I couldn't go without thanking a true business diplomat in this sense, Elena Orella. She's the director of sustainability for Bolton Food for Garavilla in Basque Country. And she's been extremely helpful in condensating the information around their efforts. Just to make this not too long and not to go get lost in the specifics, Bolton Food is a fishing industry related company, a multinational, whose main raw material is tuna. Tuna being also at the same time the main fishery in the world, and the one in which the supply chain is the longest, right? It mainly has to do with developing countries where fisheries are taking place, and it also happens in international waters, with from a security perspective poses some challenges as well. The company has a very clear sustainability long-term view, and they're implementing their agenda in this sense, as we'll see just in a moment. So fishing in international waters has got a certain particularity to it, obviously, I was speaking, and the mere activity of around the fisheries themselves pose threats to both business and security. In which sense? There are human rights issues, there are biodiversity and conservation issues, there are environmental issues, there are fishing techniques issues, there's the risk of person and drug trafficking, there is piracy, as we know, we've seen recently, and that has potential connections to terrorism, international terrorism. So as we see, there are threats that live in both worlds of affecting business activity and also obviously international relations and security in this sense. So how is Bolton tackling these issues? They exercising the tools and skills that they spoke about in the beginning through, in this case, personalizing Elena Orella and her team. They became part of the UN Global Compact, committing to sustainability principles. And they signed an agreement with a different stakeholder that is not a market one, so to speak, WWF, through which they were gonna attain 100% sustainable tuna for the fisheries by 2024. This they would do through the International Seafood Sustainability Fund, in terms of conservation of the biodiversity they need in order to be able to, again, move on with their own business, but yes, contribute to sustainability from a more environmental perspective. I think the APR, the responsible tuna fishing certification, is a very clear example of the collaboration I was talking about before, in the sense that not only allows for a company, and in this case, Bolton is the first and only company obtaining the APR certification for the fisheries, but also it respects and includes WLO's 188 Convention on sea workers. So, in other words, caring for workers' interest and rights in international waters where fisheries are happening, but also in the sense that Bolton was part of the process of creating the certification itself. In other words, the collaboration that I was talking about between governments and private companies, in the sense of creating that space for the sustainability of both interests, right? And finally, and last but not least, they just signed an agreement with Oxfam, through which the nonprofit is going to monitor the human rights perspective in the supply chain that I was talking about before, most of which happens in developing countries and elsewhere. I point out to other stakeholders as well, because the company has been able to secure, I would argue, more market-related, more company-related issues, such as the access to talent or the rights of their employees in a way that they were able to develop particular programs for women workers in Latin America, and they were also able to provide for their children in the sense of creating schools for them, which they're arguing it's helping them retain the talent they need for the factories and their operations. So again, I think there are contributions to business and security from the business development aspect. So as a conclusion, I bring 4 points here before moving forward. Business diplomacy helps companies in their long-term sustainability. Sustainability contributes to a better P&L, obviously, as we've seen. And there is a collaboration potential which is mutually beneficial for businesses and for security outcomes as well in the scenario of international relations. That as a conclusion, I think makes business an important international actor in the international arena and also for international relations. And moving forward, and very much in line with my colleague Nayara, I see 4 lines that might be interesting to explore. Number one would be the private public collaboration in the field of international relations, and this was an example that speaks to that point. Business diplomacy is an international legislative subsidy, as it happens with lobbying in one sense. Governments could benefit from the expertise of companies when it comes to legislating as well. Business diplomacy and commercial diplomacy as tools for sub-state actors, and I'm speaking more from the perspective of sub-state governments in this case, and how that could be helpful for these entities to push forward their international interests. And then I think it's quite important, and there might be work around this, but I think it's something where we should probably deepen, is measuring the impact of how business diplomacy is actually benefiting both companies and international relations that would help us make a robust case around our interests. So thank you, Eskerrik asko. Thank you for your time, and please open to questions.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Ander, Esker. And also thank you for, because we know in the States it's really early in the morning. It's like, might be like 5 or 6 in the morning. So thanks a lot for that.
My pleasure, thank you.
And okay, so we're gonna now move on to the third panelist, right? Third person intervening. In this case, it's my colleague, Dr. Sergio Caballero. Sergio, you're there? Yes, right? Just check that he has access to his audio. We can't hear you, but
yeah, I'm here. Thank you.
okay, you're sharing now the program, not the PowerPoint. We see the program, but not the PowerPoint. Now we see the PowerPoint. Now we see you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Is it okay now?
Yes, now we see the PowerPoint. Yes. Okay, I'm going to be introducing Sergio Caballero, who has a PhD in International Relations by the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, and also a BA in Political Science and a BA in Law, also from the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. He has been working before in Madrid, and since 2016 he joined the Department of International Relations here in Bilbao, the University of Deusto, and he is the main researcher and leads the research group called International Relations and Multidimensional Security, which I'm a proud member of, and and we both of us figure out that it could be interesting to share with you business internationalization and threats to multilateralism, which is a work we are working together on. And so, Sergio, even though I'm the moderator, I'm with you on this presentation. So thanks a lot, and yours is the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Inigo. Thank you very much, Hub, for organizing this amazing event. So I hope that all of you are enjoying it. Yes, the first thing that I would like to clarify is that Ander, Caballero, and myself, we are not relatives, and you don't have to think that everybody in Spain used to have a surname as this one. It is just pure coincidence, right? I would like to present this paper, and as Inigo has already said, as he's playing other roles today, he has left me alone to present, to face this challenge to present a paper in just 10 minutes. But as I wanted to just to share some of the greatest or the highlights of this paper, I have just focused on 5, or I have structured my presentation on 5 slides. So I would like to also, according to what Dr. Boleski has mentioned, and I will try to steal some ideas from him while presenting this, I would like to contextualize a little bit what we are trying to do in this paper, Business Internationalization of Threats and Threats of Multilateralism. The first thing that Inigo and I that we have done in this paper, it is to try to put a little of context, trying to see the international arena before the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And something that was important to highlight is that we were already living in a structural crisis of globalization. So according to a very well-known Spanish scholar and also a very good friend of us, Sanauja, he has already proof, or he has already confirmed how this model of globalization, mainly since 2016, let's say, is facing an exhaustion of capitalist model. We have problems, as has been mentioned, regarding the environmental sustainability, and in certain ways, we have an increasing political and social disaffection due to the increasing inequalities, and it seems that the social contract could be at stake. Right. Apart from that, we could mention many other issues, many other features of this pre-COVID-19 scenario. I will enter into the following one in a couple of minutes, but increasing tensions between a declining United States and a challenging China, as well as how it has provoked rising nationalism and protectionist measures in international trade, which is going to have a huge impact. It has been mentioned in a certain way also in the previous presentation by Nayara, and also how other parts of the globe, it doesn't mean that, we don't have time, it is a little bit out of the scope of this presentation, but the European Union remains focused on itself. Latin America in this case would be increasingly irrelevant due to the fact that it is mainly a rule taker rather than a rule maker, and Africa could be once again, and unfortunately, the so-called forgotten continent, right? What is important also here for us, and I will go back to that afterwards, it is the new role of the civil society and this tension, this debate that has been mentioned regarding social networks and how they could, promote accountability and increasing role of the civil society, whereas at the same time, it could be instrumentalized in order to foster populism, right? And finally, as I mentioned here, just as some context, once again, the Agenda 2030 has the greatest consensus in Earth these days, right? And I will go back to that at the end of the presentation. So the first, one of the first elements that have been tackled in our paper, it is precisely these tensions between the United States and China. And even if we could go further afterwards in the Q&A part, and probably Inigo would be, as he's the expert in the United States, he will be able to help me or to answer the questions regarding this specific issue. But the important thing regarding this U.S.-Chinese tension or U.S.-China tension, it is how we have incorporated an agent structure debate explanation, and what we have before the pandemic, it is mainly, as we could imagine, as you have in mind, a long-term Chinese strategy. I mean, thinking in a very long-term vision. Whereas in the recent years, we have observed a U.S. lack of grand strategy, right? If we analyze this due to the or connected to the pandemic, and we try to highlight the presence or the as Dr. Bolesky was saying before, the emotional elements, or in this case, Donald Trump's personality, so the agency, we could see how agency and structure are related, but how the equation or the result of this is an accumulated tension, which who knows? There is a question mark there when we talk about new Cold War. It is not that we are expecting to move towards a bipolar context, but in any case, those tensions are bad for international business operations, right? And what we are constatating, it is indeed the erosion of those traditional alliances, the international liberal institutions, those shared norms and values, that has been fostering international business operation throughout the last decades, right? So it would give us the clue that we are in a sort of point of inflection, or those long-term trends are changing in certain way, right? And that gives us the opportunity to jump into the third part of the paper regarding specifically global governance and multilateralism. And here, something that we would like to underline, it is how we are observing shifts on global governance in the last years. This is not just related to the pandemic, on the contrary, but since several years ago, we see how it seems that we're moving from regionalism that used to be centripetal, that used to promote cohesiveness in the regions. So from regionalism to trans-regionalism. So trans-regionalism understood as a sort of, you could call it as you prefer, economic megablocks, or multilateralism à la carte, or a certain selective clubs that are picking from one place and the other as a sort of, choosing the best partners to join to a selective club, right? We have many examples. I'm not going to enter into that right now, but you all know about the TPP-11. So after the Trans-Pacific Partnership and after the withdrawal of the United States, how in any case it was signed with those 11 members, and also the very recent Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership launched by China, which was indeed signed November 15, right? So just some weeks ago, right? And the other shift, the other feature that should be highlighted here, it is to understand how we have been moving from multilateralism. So remember, this environment where international business used to operate, to a sort of mini-lateralism. Mini-lateralism understood, or with a very important characteristic, which is a centrifuge characteristic. I mean, it tries to, or it promotes this sort of disconnection or lack of cohesiveness, and in many cases, and I quoted here Malamud and Viola in a very recent article, highlighting how rather than trying to collaborate, or promoting regionalism or multilateralism regarding all the kind of things, what we see is how some specific powers, some specific states try to join for issue area negotiations and just to tackle some specific issues, right? Which, generates this sort of lack of cohesion and fragmentation of the international scenario, right? Nevertheless, and we wanted to highlight this, the pandemic, the COVID-19, rather than being understood as a systemic point of inflection or a changing trend, what has been doing, it is to reinforce, to accelerate, to strengthen all those previous trends that were already taking place, all those dynamics that were already in place, as some economists such as Richard Haas or Roderick or others have been highlighting in the last months, right? So that's the diagnosis or the international scenario where we are living in, right? So where is business diplomacy here, right? And that probably you were wondering, where is business diplomacy? Well, business diplomacy should be understood as a value labor, right? We have to understand that, and we have just highlighted 3 different realms where business diplomacy could be useful, suitable to try to understand this complex international scenario. The first one, as you see in the screen, as you see in the slide, it is that those companies, those CEOs are closely tied to an increasingly complex geopolitical system. We are getting used to live in a higher, in an incertitude, or in a higher incertitude environment, right? So it is more difficult to predict what is going to happen. It is more difficult to react, and we are learning to be more flexible. And also companies, they need to get used to play in this complex geopolitical system, and business diplomacy could be a good tool, a good way to understand this. Apart from that, we have also, and this here comes the second point, we have tried to analyze, or to it is more developed in the paper, but we have tried to analyze business diplomacy from inside, or with an inward perspective and an outward perspective. And in this sense, at Intra, we see how we need to develop business diplomacy capabilities, at the business strategy, right? And that could seem obvious. It is going to foster, it is going to strengthen those business strategies. And what it is even more important for us is that if we apply an outward perspective, so at Extra, there's a need for transformative abilities to play in a complex reality. It means that business diplomacy shouldn't be considered just as a reactive strategy. So how I could find out solutions, how could I predict something bad that is going to happen, how could I tackle risk analysis or geopolitical risk. It is not just about that. It is, but it is something more. It is also, or it could be understood also as a creative contribution, in the sense that it enables us to shape the international ecosystem, right? Thanks to those interactions, thanks to those ties, companies and business diplomacy could shape or reshape the international ecosystem, right? The last idea regarding business diplomacy, it is mainly related to, well, we have already mentioned, and one of the questions by Inigo to the previous conference by Dr. Boleski was precisely about, apart from the states or NGOs, individual, I mean, apart from the typical IR actors, there were also subnational actors. Yeah, and I will also, or we will also add how the private sector itself plays a key role in international political economy. I'm not going to enter into that because I think it was very accurately expressed and explained by Nayara in her previous exposition, that it is going to be or it has to be highlighted how it is crucial to understand and shape IR. In other words, and as it is written over there, the fact that we could analyze companies as integrated actors in international relations allows us, or allows a more comprehensive understanding of their systemic and structural shaping power. In other words, business diplomacy as a suitable, as a useful, as a desirable tool to understand or to be used by companies, but also to help and move forward IR, international relations, right? Just to finish with, and I hope that we're in time, I have tried to fix or to be constrained and limit to just 10 minutes. We're just sharing some conclusions, right? So after having discussed, Inigo and myself, the greatest thing of writing a paper between two people is that while doing it, you keep on discussing, right? And sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree, and that's the reason why we try to, to bring all this idea to you, right? There's some conclusions. Firstly, and coming from or drawing from the diagnosis that we have presented at the very beginning, companies are facing growing weakness of multilateralism. We have already mentioned how we are suffering this erosion of multilateralism, of shared norms and values, that it is bad, remember, for international business, right? But at the same time, we have to realize that due to the COVID pandemic, we have experienced a greatest and strongest or the strongest interaction ever between geopolitics and international trade, right? We cannot disentangle, we could not distinguish, because it is getting more and more interconnected. So that make us once again come to the greatest, or to the most important conclusion or reflection, that it is the suitability of business diplomacy, but mainly as applied knowledge. So as a roadmap, as a way to try to give us some clues in a very empirical way. Well, Ander Caballero has very recently mentioned an example, but how to do business and internationalize in an uncertain world. So it has to be an applied knowledge. It has to be something that gives us clues that works as a roadmap that enable us to understand better and to react better and to contribute in a better way to the shape of the international ecosystem. And finally, we will also wanted to highlight, or one of the main conclusions that could be drawn from our research is the specific role of the private sector, of the companies as an actor to participate in this, well, what I have already mentioned, the aforementioned shaping of the ecosystem, right? The private actor as an agent capacity, that's the reason why we play before, remember, when dealing with the US Donald Trump's personality and the international scenario. So the agent structure debate, which is very typical in international relations. And also to try to, the other element would be to try to how a company, the private sector specifically, co-create, contribute and reshape, but contribute to promotion and respect for international standards. If not, if moving to this minilateralism that I have mentioned before, things are getting more complicated, more fragmented, more polarized, and without those norms, business diplomacy, but well, international relations in general could become more and more difficult, tougher, and well, even more unpredictable, right? And finally, the last remark, it is also connected to some of the very interesting comments that was mentioned by Dr. Bolevsky, and I would like to go back to that and connect it when he was talking about mutual restraint, and he said that it is not just, in theory, a priori, business is about winning, but we have to be able, thanks to business diplomacy, practical diplomacy, to be able to promote mutual restraint. Well, this idea, that's what I was saying, that I was stealing some ideas from him, even if that was written before his presentation. But we have to understand that companies have to move from trade, so from this idea of just winning, just obtaining benefits, to what we have previously said, these sustainable development goals, this idea of sustainability, which is mainly promoted and launched and sponsored by the Agenda 2030, right? And this is also an asset when dealing with business diplomacy. I will stop here just to give enough time for the Q&A part, and also to give, if necessary, to give the floor once again to Inigo, just in case, well, something's still missing, or just to keep on our, well, personal debates about the topics, about the paper, that I'm sure that you are going to help us keep on developing, right? Thank you very much, and we're here for you. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Sergio. Muchas gracias. Thanks, everyone. Okay, now my pleasure to open the Q&A part, right? We already have some questions on the chat. If you agree, I'm going to be reading them. And even though they are directed to Ander and Sergio, I think we can just make a round intervention if you agree, right? The questions are, one coming from Diana, who says, how should contributions of business to global public goods be regulated or assessed? What are the challenges of bringing business to a role that traditionally used to be that of the state? That is one of the questions, right? And the second comes from Kirsten, which says, again, to Ander, in the spring 2020, Edelman Trust Barometer showed that for the first time in 20 years, that governments were the most trusted institution, not businesses, right? And how does that impact your perspective on business diplomacy, if at all, right? Sorry. And then we've got just give me a second because okay, there we go. And we have a last wait a minute. Naya has a question, right? That says, as many of you have pointed out during the conference, we're in the process of deglobalization, in which some parts of the international scene might be fragmented. Could you say that business diplomacy intends to join or integrate these parts that are fragmented or separated, right? So, and the last one, Sergio, this one is for you, right? There are more, sorry. I'll take the one, and which says, in order to overcome that obscurity of Africa and Latin America that you have mentioned in your slides, which domain of business diplomacy is the most necessary to be developed? Public, private, civic, right? I'm going to stop here, and then if there are more questions, we'll take them later, right? Not to have too many things on the plate, okay? So who wants to start?
Shall we follow the same order as the presentation? As you wish.
And there you've got one question. You want to address it?
I get to take it first, of course. Well, I mean, it is my reading that governments indeed are increasing the level of trust that they've got among populations in the past 20 years. But it's still, again, my reading of the barometer itself, and also of other polls that were run by Axios and other polling companies, maybe more focused on the COVID crisis. But it's my understanding that still there is mistrust in how governments are handling certain issues. It is true that again, back to the barometer, and again, it's my understanding that trust is increasing among populations. But there's still a gap, as it seems. In any case, I think there is still a place for business, as you were asking, to contribute to that, right? I was thinking about what is the space of collaboration between both governments and businesses, pushing precisely that trust that people need to have in them in order to push for international agenda. So I'll revert back to that point of collaboration. I think it's important, and it impacts the perspectives on business diplomacy in a sense that there needs to be more collaboration in order to build that trust from those actors coming from population. Shall we go straight through the questions? You want to address them one by one?
No, as you wish. You gonna give some answer to that question which was made to you directly, or?
Excuse me, was that a question to me, Inigo?
No, to Nayara and Sergio.
Oh, sorry.
Sergio?
Shall I? Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, sorry. I thought that Ander was frozen. Sorry, this is my computer. Well, there are a couple of questions here that I would like to, that I have to answer, right? I think there is one by Nayara, if I'm not wrong, by Naya, sorry. Remember, or regarding business diplomacy, how it intends to join this fragmented world. And yeah, definitely, I think that what is important here, it is that it seems that we are moving towards a more, fragmented, as I have said before, from multilateralism to minilateralism, and business diplomacy could and should play a role here, right? Understanding the way of doing business in a more sustainable way, and that also could encourage development, right? In theory, and in certain way that could promote this sort of cohesiveness that I have been mentioning in my presentation. So yeah, it could be a way to try to understand it, right? The other one, just to try to tackle, to address the two questions that were to my part, if I'm not wrong, it is the one by Asier talking about this obscurity of Africa and Latin America. And please not misunderstand me. It is not about obscurity. It is just that we're assuming, at least for the presentation, that whatever is happening between the United States and China is modifying, is shaping the international context, and it is also promoting these increasing tensions and protectionist measures. And for better or worse, it seems that Africa and Latin America, in terms of size, economic size, they don't have enough room to modify or to challenge those initiatives, right? So it is about size. It is not about, as once again, stealing words from Dr. Bolesky, it couldn't be about an emotional cognition or emotional perception regarding Latin America and Africa, not at all.
Nayara, you've got one question. Let me just quickly read it, which is from question to Nayara. In terms of post-globalization, do you think that this decline in international organizations or international deglobalization is an isolated case due to COVID, or this is something that will return later? Are we facing a new economic, technological, political, social, and cultural process on a world scale, right? How should the multinational corporations act?
Okay, thank you for the question, Jose Maria. I try to answer, even if I think it's really difficult to predict this. Well, I don't think the COVID is one of the reasons why this decline of the organizations has happened. Actually, it's something that has accelerated. Those were there was already a fragmentation in the system before. So what the COVID has done is it has accelerated this process. So I don't think it's an isolated case. How the future will be, to be honest, I have no idea. Like right now, it seems like we are going back to that nationalism or taking measures in a more national level. It's maybe because of the pandemic afterwards. Who knows, right? But when it comes to talk about how multinationals act, right now I think multinationals are acting more in a unilateral level, maybe negotiate with nation states regarding the measures to be taken, and that's something positive because maybe they can succeed in those agreements that haven't succeeded in a more regional or international level. Who knows? So I think that the role of the multinational corporations in that sense is positive. I have no idea to answer if we are going towards a more national economic system or international system, or to we will have another wave of regionalism or international organizations. Who knows?
Thank you very much, Nayara. If there are any other questions coming from the public, anyone else wanting to intervene? I've got lots of things that I'm taking notes about your three presentations, but it would be tricky to ask about my own paper, right? So I think it makes more sense that I do it something general, right? Particularly because it's something that we saw on the keynote speech by Wilfred and by the three of you, Rich, which is this new role that if we take business diplomacy as a tool, as a capacity to perform better, to deliver results by the companies, right? Apparently there is a new thing that is cross-cutting element in all your interventions as well as in Wilfred's, which is the role of the international company or internationalized companies in shaping the ecosystem, as Sergio mentioned before, right? In participating, not only assuming the roles, values, norms, and trying to interact in order to perform better their business, but also into taking their role, assuming their role in shaping those norms and values, which is something that traditionally we haven't been talking about too much, right? We talk about getting understanding the ecosystem, operating, the license to operate, right? Hope and others, and Raymond and Licio and others have been very active in writing on this, right? But this is something new. You're talking about participating as an actor, as a primary actor in international relations, in shaping future environment, right? And it's an open question if you wanted, any one of you.
Yeah, and I want to chime in here. I think you're absolutely right. That's my perspective too, and I was pointing out in that direction in my presentation. I also think it speaks to what Naya is asking, and I would maybe reframe that question in the sense that it's not business diplomacy that's gonna either join or reject those integrating parts or not. Business diplomacy is actually the ability, the skills that are gonna allow for companies to navigate those either fragmented or separating or not separating worlds, right? So assuming those skills, training your teams with those skills and understanding what that means is going to allow you to navigate those turbulent waters. And to your point, Inigo, I think, and back to the collaboration point, I think that is the space where things need to happen now. That is the room where it happens, as they say. I mean, that's where it should happen, where governments and the skills and the know-how of businesses can come together and start shaping the future of international matters.
Sergio Nayara, you want to add something on this?
That's to say that I totally agree to Ander. I mean, nothing else to add. 100% agree.
Okay.
Me
And I
too.
should
I
point
want.
out that there's a third caballero in the audience, so it's the name of the day.
Everybody's
I
going
have
to
to say,
realize
I agree.
that we are brothers and sisters.
But just to mention something, I do agree as well. I think it's really important. I think the entire situation has shown that the economic model as well is getting to its end. It seems that something is not working. I think we are getting to the end of this neoliberal economic model. As such, we need to introduce another dimension, which is more sustainable, more sustainable. I think the consumers appreciate it, governments appreciate it, and corporations need to take that into account. So I think it's time to go toward that collaboration together, states and corporations, because it benefits to everyone, to be honest. Well, I want to think. Maybe it's a little bit propagandistic, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's my thought.
No. And on that, Ander mentioned Bolton Food, Garavilla. It's a very good example, right? Not only in getting comfortable with the existing values and norms and operations, but also shaping this case, the APR, right? The sustainable fishing industry future norms, values could be inspired on this, which has been co-created by Bolton Food, right? Which is a step forward. It's a new thing, right? Naya also, and this is we probably we can close with this. Naya on the chat says that would you say that business diplomacy then is one of the main axes of organizations in the future? I assume private organizations, right? And even though she says, even though it's quite a new field, right?
Yeah, and my answer would be, I don't know if it will be in the sense that she's pointing out, it's a new discipline and quite a new field, but it should be. And that's what I think most of us are trying to advocate for, right? And therefore my question about not only the collaboration space, but also the metrics around that. Because you want to build a case around this. And if we believe that this has to be the discipline or the, I mean, again, the field in which private corporations specifically, but also in that field of collaboration, with the perspective public need to operate in, then we need to demonstrate, we need to build a case that shows companies and governments that they can be that trust, that they can be that mutual value construction and gaming, right? On the public and on the private side. Yeah. So I would agree with Naya. I think it definitely should be the field.
Sure. Yeah. So we don't want to quantify to convince others, but quantifying is part of the issue, right? We need to quantify how business diplomacy is improving business, not because the aim is better numbers, but because this would give an argument for for improvement and create room for improvement and identify pending issues, right? Okay, so running out of time, and I don't want to take more time because now we have a lunch break, and lunch is also important, and breakfast in your case, Ander. So again, thank you very much, the three of you. That's very generous to share with us today. And in this first panel on paper presentations, as for the audience, thank you very much for your interventions, for your questions, right? Now